Sahanau Bhunektu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us. May that one nourish us. May we work together with great energy. And may our study be full of vigor and excellence. Let us not cavil with each other, and peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we're in the midst of studying Chapter 8, Akshara Brahma Yoga. And it's useful just to recap a few things. But we'll have time for questions, because if there are no questions, there are no answers. So afterwards we'll have. So the hope is to conclude this, and often the question comes up, more or less from every person, from time immemorial, as long as man has been on this planet. What happens when this body dies? Is there some kind of soul that goes beyond it, beyond this physical world? And can we locate our ancestors? And can they be useful to us? And how will we behave or pray so that our ancestors get a good journey? That's how it was visualized. And so from a starting point of view, it's not a bad start to speculate on these things. So just to recap some of the things that we have discussed before, it's very, very important in this study to understand how nature is arranged. And we base this arrangement on the Sankhya idea of categories, various elements. So it's useful just to recap that and see. Because the subject of this whole chapter is to do with Akshara, something that is imperishable. And so, once more, we have to highlight, in contrast to that, what is perishable. And anything that is perishable, is it worth pursuing? Is it worth pursuing as a main pursuit? Of course, it's worth pursuing in minor ways. But is it worth pursuing as the key note of our life, the main thrust and purpose, the main direction where we assemble all our energies and move towards? And we know that when we assemble all our energies and direct it in a certain way, with a strong desire, dedication, determination, we get what we want, for ill or good. So, with that in mind, this chapter is important because it answers some various questions. And many of these questions have been answered up to the point of this study. There was a suggestion that the yogi can assemble all his forces or her force and poetically align them in the middle of the forehead and so on, and maybe use the royal entrance exit. So the body is registered as a 9-gated city, if we recall, with all the gates closed and so on. But this takes a lot of skill and discipline, and for the vast majority of people, to take all that energy and direct it as love of God becomes a useful way of raising all these forces so that an inner rapture takes place, an elevation takes place, and automatically so-called individual will and divine will become aligned. The formative thought, says Sri Ramakrishna, that dominates the mind of the one who leaves the body is the factor that governs and contributes to the next birth of that individual. Spiritual discipline is therefore imperative to one and all. The devotee of the Lord is ever immersed in the thought of God. Being firmly fixed in it, he reaches the Lord on giving up the body. It assumes that there is a kind of transmigration of souls. And so we have to understand what is the logic for that. We have really three options. The one option really is that there's a genetic inheritance coming to us. We know that about the physical body. We know that XY chromosomes join together and an individual forms from there and entirely unique, with unique skills and talents and abilities. What here in this text is called Swadharma. Not everybody can be a master archer such as Arjuna was. Not everybody can be a military person. What is our primary occupation? Well, where you find yourself. You find naturally an assemblage of seemingly designed talents and abilities that you can use. And if you can use them for the benefit of others, then that gives a certain sense of fulfillment. And so the other approach will be a theological understanding that somehow in the womb of the mother, some soul gets kind of injected. But we take that aside, and from a philosophical point of view, even a rational point of view, we won't accept that, since something that starts in time and goes on infinitely, it must always have been infinite. So we put that one aside. There's no guarantee that physical inheritance creates some mental inheritance, some behavioral aspect which makes all children individual, even in the womb. And so, working on the pattern, the cyclical pattern of nature herself, we see that death is not on the horizon for anything. A cyclical way of transforming life is there. Only the name and form and changing, and in line with certain physical conservation laws, we find that if we burn some material in a fire, then it comes off as carbon and smoke and other things, and when we add all that up, it all adds together. This is just a recap of what we have stated before. So we assume that there is a carry-on forward, and we have unlimited opportunities because of the Lord's grace for passing our examinations without limit. And so this depends on generating a certain thrust in our life, a certain unconscious direction, a certain habit that we are able to form in the face of things which are counterproductive to us, bad habits, negative habits. And then the Lord, last week we went through, it says, I am easily attainable. The Lord's taking the position of the most supreme principle of all the categories. And most people put themselves in the category of an individual soul, positioning themselves in a certain relationship with the supreme principle, the supreme Purusha. And in this Gita, Sri Krishna himself is positioning himself there. And the devotee naturally is positioning himself as, what do you call it, jiva, an individual soul. Whether that soul feels that they are separated from that supreme entity, or in some way connected, or one with it, seeming to be separate, gives rise to many different philosophical points of view. But for our purposes, we start as any beginner starts, with an assumption that we are, as we feel, somehow separated. And the devotee then taps into that supreme principle through love and devotion. So I am easily attainable, says Sri Krishna, by that ever steadfast yogi, means practitioner, of a dedicated movement toward this truth and freedom, who constantly remembers me daily and thinks of none else. This is a great method that is easily available to all of us. That's the point. And so Sri Ramakrishna says, when we take one stride towards the Lord, he takes 10 strides toward us. I'm simply recapping just to remind you. We covered this already. And then Sri Krishna says, Mam upetyo punarjanma dukkhalayam ashashvatam nagno vanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gataha. Having come to me, the great souls are no more subject to rebirth. All this rebirth that we are assuming, what we call reincarnation, is in reality an attempt to get out of it, not to continue with it, to do something different. We have done what we do because we've always done it. But at some point in time, life pinches us, and we have a chance to stand back and review. It's not working. We have to change our direction and change the way we view things. And so the great souls, those who have this desire, this dedication, this determination, to attain the Supreme Principle, as it were, they are no more subject to rebirth. They don't have to go through it in any sense, in any relative sense at all, because it's transitory. And it is the abode of pain. Sooner or later that realization comes, that this cycle that we're involved in is actually the abode of pain. With a few, described in the Buddhist literature as a bed of thorns with a few occasional roses that we exaggerate and say, my life is rosy. It's not rosy, it's just that we have an absence of difficulty at that particular moment. But there's no permanence for it. Sooner or later, some pain will come in. And for they, he says, have reached the highest perfection. That means they don't have to come back. They pass the examination, and they are now in a state of supreme bliss eternally. They are one with the Father in the language of Jesus. But what about others? That has to be described. So, Brahma Bhuvanal Laukaha Punararvati Narjane Bam Upecha Kutu Kunteya Punarjanma Ma Vijjati. All worlds, including that of Brahma, subject to return, O Arjun. But on reaching me, O son of Kunti, there is no rebirth, he repeats it. So what do we mean by this? In the grand scheme of things with all these categories, there is a Brahma Loka, the highest supreme place in the relative world of nature. Something like a great soul is there, something like a Mahat, something like a supreme principle in a relative sense, and in a theological sense, something like a personal God. Something like a heaven, if you like. So, there's an understanding about heaven. So many jokes, of course, about heaven today, you know. And I think I've told you my favorite joke was some big person goes to heaven, and they decide things are very crowded there. Now, different cultures have different versions of this. So you can say at the gateway is Yam, but in Christianity the gate St. Peter stands. He says, you know, things are very difficult, but you're a simple person. 3 simple questions are necessary. Once you pass that, you can gain entry. So what are these 3 questions? Well, how many days of the week begin with the letter T? How many seconds are there in a year? And what is God's personal name? The name we refer to personally in heaven. But you can go and think about it. You have a long time, 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes in eternity is, you know, 500 years, I suppose. Anyway, he comes back with a smile on his face. I have all the answers. Days of the week, beginning with the letter T, there are 2 days. Today and tomorrow. Ah, okay. That's not the answer we expected. How many seconds are in the year? 12 seconds. 12 seconds. You weren't a very good mathematician on earth. Now in heaven, you failed a little bit. No. There are 12 seconds. January the 2nd, February the 2nd, March the 2nd, and so it goes on. See? And then, okay, what is God's personal name that we refer to him here? Or his name is Howard. Howard? Yes, because the Lord's Prayer is there. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. And so that's how it goes. All right. We think of the afterlife in these terms, in material terms. And no doubt, there are in every religion this aspect of material worlds, but they are all as transitory and relative as this world today, and it's only through this personal equipment that we can reach the highest. This equipment we have physical equipment capable of receiving all the impressions from the external world and reacting, and a mind to go with it. Some 16 perishable parts in the grand scheme of nature have been outlined. And then beyond that gross world, we have all aspects of self-awareness. Even an atom, according to the Samkhya system, even an atom has some element of self-awareness. Collectively, we can call it egoism. And then there are these rudimentary forces, these glories of the Lord. angels if you like, divine expressions if you like, devas if you like, these subtle elements, 5 of them. And then where do they emanate from? A creative entity who expresses through a word, Vak or Vani or Saraswati in modern terms. And this cosmic mind is what we call in mythology Brahma, with 4 heads facing in 4 directions, symbolizing being omniscient and knowing every corner. Omniscient and omnipresent. Its realm is something like the sun. And so this realm is where those who somehow miss the mark, who haven't got this freedom and liberation, and yet they have in some way discovered this supreme reality of what we call Atman, the Supreme Self. And so, provision has to be made there, all worlds, including that of Brahma. All worlds, whether we know it or not. If there's a multiverse, all worlds there. If there are many worlds, all worlds there. If there are parallel universes, all worlds there. If there are dimensions we cannot see, all worlds there. And our own world, which is visible to us. Even for them, of course, there is no rebirth. So they spend some time, as it were, again it's a relative expression in this Brahmaloka. How much time? But we have to make a supreme calculation. What is that calculation? So we mentioned that this cycle, which is there, kalpa, comes in increasing years as we go backwards. So the original aspect of it is called Satya Yuga, where there is supreme purity and goodness and harmony. And as time goes on, this degenerates until it comes to the last age, which is called Kali Yuga. And the last of those years, 432,000 of them. And cumulatively, that whole cycle is 4.32 billion years of our human calculation. And that is times 100, or it's 1 day of Brahma. And that represents you can see how we duplicate human life, cosmic life. So at some stage or other, 1 day is finished, 1 day is over, and the whole universe then goes back into a state of deep sleep, as it were, a kind of withdrawal for another period of the same time, and emerges again, but the same Brahma is there. And after, I said 100 mean 1,000 actually, and then after 100 such years, the whole thing finishes and everything starts again with a new Brahma, perhaps some entity that got some kind of perfection, and it's his job, as it were, his duty to be ruler of the universe. So this is all in the transitory range. Where does that come from? It comes from another category, the last in the series of relativity, and that is what is called nature itself. Nature, where is something like in experience, a deep sleep where no arrangements take place, no disturbances take place, no ripples take place. A state of potentiality. And then that's repeated. So we have this curious idea, compatible also now with modern science, that we don't have an origin. There is no creation as such, or theological difficulty to say, where did the creator come from? And where was the second-hand shop he had to go to, and who made that, and goes on ad infinitum. Those problems don't arise, just to recap some of the things. And so they wait for that seeming eternity, enjoying the fruits of their deep connection with the Lord. But you'll see this is a vast scale of time, and this we discussed last week also. And those who know that the day of Brahma lasts 1,000 yugas, 1,000 of them, that is 1,000 of these 4 kalpas, and that his night lasts another 1,000 yugas, they are the knowers of day and night, because that puts everything in perspective now. So it goes on like that. In the verse it goes, Sahasra yuga paryantam aha yat brahmano viduhu ratrim yuga sahasrantam te horatraida janaha. See, Brahma the Creator is also a Jivatman, living, and having a cosmic function to fulfill, and wending his way towards freedom, towards mukti. We can put it in that way as well. Then what happens at the coming of day? All manifest beings proceed from that unmanifest, and the coming of night, and they merge again in the same, which is called the unmanifested. So this word unmanifested is there, and we don't say creation, we say manifestation. That being manifests from where? From a second entity? No, from itself. Manifesting from itself. Being both, in some sense, even in a relative sense, a material cause, as well as an agency. So this whole multitude of beings coming forth again and again merge, O Partha, in spite of themselves at the approach of night, and remanifest themselves at the approach of day. There's a book here, Heinrich Zimmer, a well-known Indologist, and he was very famous for compiling myths and symbols in various cultures, but particularly Indian art and civilization. And he gathered a story here which illustrates this vastness and this apparent eternality of the cyclical arrangement of this relative world. 1,000 Mahayugas, that is, 4320 followed by another 6 zeros of human reckoning constitutes a single day of Brahma. He reminds us, a single kalpa. And in terms of the reckonings of the deities who are below Brahma, otherwise in philosophy called, or metaphysics called, these tanmatras. Such a day begins with creation, or evolution is a preferable term. We say creation as a convenience term, but the proper thing is srishti, a kind of projection. The emanation of a universe out of divine, transcendent, unmanifested substance, and terminates with dissolution and reabsorption called pralaya, and back into the absolute. So we have two things going on, because any experience requires two elements: the observer and the thing that is observed, the perceiver and the thing that is perceived. And as long as that arrangement is there, we have to go one step further to find out who or what is this perceiver, even on a cosmic level. What is the cosmic perceiver, as it were? And so it goes on, telling us about the split and the how we can break this down into various sections and various intervals and so on. The progress and decline of every kalpa, he says, is marked by mythological events that recur similarly again and again in magnificence. And then he goes on to say, at the dawn of each kalpa, each cycle, Brahma re-emerges from, in mythology, a lotus that has stemmed and blossomed out of the navel of Vishnu, a pre-existing primordial entity indicating a vastness and pervasiveness that is indescribable. And from there is projected this manifesting entity, this creative entity. I'll try and get to the story because there's a vast story going on. If I can't find it easy, I would go on. Oh, I see here it is. Yeah, right. Indraslu the dragon is the story. The story is called the Parade of Ants. A giant titan that had been couching on the mountains in the limbless shape of a cloud serpent, holding the waters of heaven captive in its belly. The god flung his thunderbolt into the midst of the ungainly coils. The monster shattered like a stack of withered rushes. The waters burst free and streamed in ribbons across the land to circulate once more through the body of the world. This flood is the flood of life and belongs to all. It is the sap of field and forest, he writes so beautifully. The blood coursing in the veins. The monster had appropriated the common benefit, massing his ambitious, selfish hulk between heaven and earth, but now was slain. And the juices again were pouring, and the titans were retreating to the underworlds. The gods were returning to the summit of the central mountain of the earth, there to reign from on high. The whole of the idea in all religious culture is the struggle between virtue and vice. And the struggle can be put into a cosmological context, because we have a struggle for things to move inward and a struggle for things to move outward. And this very often is interpreted as Indra and a counter kind of Indra. Now, during the period of supremacy of the dragon, the majestic mansions of the lofty city of the gods, this is a story, don't question it too closely, had cracked and crumbled. The first act of Indra was to rebuild them. All the divinities of the heavens were acclaiming him their savior. Greatly elated in his triumph and in the knowledge of his strength, he summoned Vishwakarma, the kind of cosmic heavenly architect. He's the god of arts and crafts, and commanded him to please erect such a palace as should befit the unequaled splendor of the king of the gods. The miraculous genius Vishwakarma succeeded in constructing in a single year a shining residence, marvelous with palaces, gardens, lakes and towers. But as the work progressed, the demands of Indra became even more exacting and his unfolding visions vaster. He acquired additional terraces and pavilions, more ponds, groves and pleasure grounds. You think that he was the supreme, honored as he was? No, he has desires. He acquired additional terraces and pavilions, ponds, groves and all that. Wherever or whenever Indra arrived to appraise the work, he developed vision beyond vision of marvels remaining to be contrived. And presently the divine craftsman, brought to absolute despair, decided creator, Brahma, the pristine embodiment of the universal spirit, who abides far above the troubled Olympian sphere of ambition, strife and glory. When Vishwakarma secretly resorted to the higher throne and presented his case, Brahma comforted the petitioner. You will soon be relieved of your burden, he said. Go home in peace. Then while Vishwakarma was hurrying down again to the city of Indra, Brahma himself descended to a still higher sphere, and he came before Vishnu, the supreme being, represented in this way, of whom he himself, the creator, was but an agent. In beatific silence, Vishnu gave ear, and by a mere nod of the head, let it be known that the request of Vishwakarma would be fulfilled. Early next morning, a Brahmin boy carrying the staff of a pilgrim made his appearance at the gate of Indra. Bidding the porter announce his visit to the king, the gateman hurried to the master, and the master hastened to the entrance to welcome in person the auspicious guest. The boy was slender, some 10 years old, radiant with the luster of wisdom, and Indra discovered him amidst a cluster of enraptured staring children. The boy greeted the host with a gentle glance of his dark and brilliant eyes. The king bowed to the holy child, and the boy cheerfully gave his blessing. The two retired to the hall of Indra, where the god ceremoniously proffered welcome to his guest with oblations of honey, milk and fruits, then said, O venerable boy, tell me of the purpose of your coming. The beautiful child replied with a voice that was as deep and soft as the slow thundering of auspicious rain clouds. O king of the gods, I have heard of the mighty palace you're building and have come to refer to you the questions in my mind. How many years will it require to complete this rich and extensive residence? What further feats of engineering will Vishwakarma be expected to accomplish? O highest of the deities, the boy's luminous features moved with a gentle, scarcely perceptible smile. No Indra before you has ever succeeded in completing such a palace as yours is to be. and full of the wine of triumph, the king of the gods was entertained by this mere boy's pretension to a knowledge of Indra's earlier than himself. With a fatherly smile, he put the question, tell me, child, are they then so very many? The Indras and the Vishwakarmans whom you have seen, or at least whom you have heard of? The wonderful guest calmly nodded. Yes, indeed, many have I seen. The voice was as warm and sweet as milk fresh from a cow, but the words sent a slow chill through Indra's veins. My dear child, the boy continued, I knew your father, Kashyapa, the old tortoise man, the lord and progenitor of all the creatures of the earth. And I knew your grandfather, Marichi, beam of celestial light, who was the son of Brahma. Marichi was begotten of the god Brahma's pure spirit. His only wealth and glory were his sanctity and devotion. Also, I know Brahma brought forth by Vishnu from the lotus calyx growing from Vishnu's navel. And Vishnu himself, the Supreme Being, supporting Brahma in his creative endeavor, him too I know. O King of gods, I have known the dreadful dissolution of the universe. I have seen all perish again and again at the end of every cycle. At that terrible time, every single atom dissolves into the primal, pure waters of eternity, whence originally all arose. Everything then goes back into the fathomless, wild infinity of the ocean, which is covered with the utter darkness and is empty of every sign of animate being. Who will count the universes that have passed away, or the creations that have risen, are fresh and again from the formless abyss of the vast waters? Who will number the passing ages of the world as they follow each other endlessly? And who will search through the wide infinities of space to count the universes side by side, each containing its Brahma, its Vishnu, and its Shiva? Who will count the Indras in them all, those Indras side by side who reign at once in all the innumerable worlds, those others who passed away before them, or even the Indras who succeed each other in any given line, ascending to godly kingship, one by one passing away? King of gods, there are among your servants certain who maintain that it may be possible to number the grains of sand on the earth and the drops of rain that fall from the sky, but no one will ever number all these Indras. This is what the knowers know. The life and kingship of an Indra, enduring 71 eons, and when 28 Indras have expired, one day and night of Brahma has elapsed. But the existence of one Brahma, measured in such Brahma days and nights, is only 108 years. And Brahma follows Brahma, one seeks, the next rises, and endless series cannot be told. There is no end to the number of those Brahmas, to say nothing of Indras. But the universe is side by side at any given moment, each harboring a Brahma and an Indra. Who will estimate the number of these? Beyond the Father's vision crowding outer space, the universes come and go, an innumerable host. Like delicate boats, they float on the fathomless, pure waters that form the body of Vishnu. What a beautiful vision. Out of every hair pore of that body, a universe bubbles and breaks. See, this multiverse was known long before physicists got hold of it. Will you presume to count them? Will you number the gods in all those worlds, the worlds present and the worlds past? A procession of ants had made its appearance in the hall during the discourse of the boy. In military array, in a column 4 yards wide, the tribe paraded across the floor, something like what happened here. In military array, the boy noted them, paused and stared, then suddenly laughed with astonishing peal, but immediately subsided into a profoundly indrawn and thoughtful silence. Why do you laugh? Stammered Indra. Who are you, mysterious being, under this deceiving guise of a boy? The proud king's throat and lips had gone dry, and his voice continually broke. Who are you, ocean of virtues enshrouding in deluding mist? The magnificent boy resumed. I laughed because of the ants, The reason is not to be told. Do not ask me to disclose it. The seed of woe and the fruit of wisdom are enclosed within this secret. It is the secret that smites with an axe the tree of worldly vanity, hews away its roots and scatters its crown. This secret is a lamp to those groping in ignorance. This secret lies buried in the wisdom of the ages and is rarely revealed even to saints. This secret is the living air of those ascetics who renounce and transcend mortal existence. But worldlings, deluded by desire and pride, it destroys. The boy smiled and sank into silence. Indra regarded him, unable to move. O son of a Brahmin, the king pleaded, presently with a new and visible humility. I do not know who you are. You would seem to be wisdom incarnate. Reveal to me the secret of the ages, this light that dispels the dark. Thus requested to teach, the boy opened to the god the hidden wisdom. I saw the ants, O Indra, filing in a long parade. Each was once an Indra. Like you, each by virtue of pious deeds once ascended to the rank of a king of gods, but now through many rebirths each has become again an ant. This army is an army of former Indras. Piety and high deeds elevate the inhabitants of the world to the glorious realm of the celestial mansions, or to the higher domains of Brahma and Shiva, and to the higher sphere of Vishnu. But wicked acts sink them into the worlds beneath, into pits of pain and sorrow, involving reincarnation among birds and other creatures, or out of the wombs of pigs and animals of the wild, or among trees or among insects, some of which appear mysteriously in bathrooms. It is by deeds that one merits happiness or anguish and becomes a master or a serf. It is by deeds that one attains to the rank of a king or Brahmin, or of some god, or of an Indra, or a Brahma. And through deeds again one contracts disease, acquires beauty and deformity, or is reborn in the condition of a monster. This is the whole substance of the secret. This wisdom is the ferry to beatitude across the ocean of hell. Life in the cycle of the countless rebirths is like a vision in a dream. The gods are high, the mute trees, the stones, are alike apparitions in this fantasy. But death administers the law of time, ordained by time. Death is the master of all. Perishable as bubbles are the good and the evil of the beings of the dream. And in unending cycles, the good and evil alternate. Hence the wise are attached to neither the evil nor the good. The wise are not attached to anything at all. So the boy concluded the appalling lesson and quietly regarded his host. And the king of gods, for all his celestial splendor, had been reduced in his own regard in insignificance. Meanwhile, another amazing apparition had entered the hall. The newcomer had the appearance of a kind of hermit. His head was piled with matted hair. He wore a black deerskin around his loins. On his forehead was painted a white mark. His head was shaded by a paltry parasol of grass, and a quaint circular cluster of hair grew on his chest. It was intact at the circumference, but from the center many of the hairs, it seemed, had disappeared. This saintly figure strode directly to Indra, and the boy squatted between them on the floor, and there remained motionless as a rock. The kingly Indra, somewhat recovering his hostly role, bowed and paid obeisance, offering sour milk with honey and other refreshments. Then he inquired, falteringly, but reverently, after the welfare of the stern guest, and bade him welcome. Whereupon the boy addressed the holy man and asked the very question Indra himself would have proposed. Whence do you come, O holy man? What is your name, and what brings you to this place? Where is your present home? And what is the meaning of the grass parasol? What is the portent of that circular hair tuft on your chest? Why is it dense at the circumference, but the center almost bare? Be kind enough, O holy man, to answer in brief these questions. I am anxious to understand. Patiently the old saint smiled and slowly began his reply. I am a Brahmin. Hairy is my name. Not Harry, Hairy. And I have come here to behold Indra, Since I know that I am short-lived, I have decided to possess no home, to build no house, and neither to marry nor to seek a livelihood. I exist by begging alms. To shield myself from sun and rain, I carry over my head this parasol of grass. As to the circle of hair on my chest, it is a source of grief to the children of the world. Nevertheless, it teaches wisdom. With the fall of an Indra, one hair drops. That is why in the center of all the hairs have gone. And when the other half of the period allotted to the present Brahma will have expired, I myself shall die. O Brahmin boy, it follows that I am somewhat short of days. What therefore is the use of family, etc., wife, son, or house? Each flicker of the eyelids of the great Vishnu registers the passing of a Brahma. Everything below that sphere of Brahma is as insubstantial as a cloud taking shape and again dissolving. And that is why I devote myself exclusively to meditating on the incomparable lotus feet of the highest all-pervading one we call Vishnu. Faith in Vishnu is more than the bliss of redemption, for every joy, even the heavenly, is as fragile as a dream, and only interferes with one-pointedness of our faith in Him supreme. So we see, get some kind of glimpse of this eternal nature of the relative existence. To understand properly, there's I won't even refer to it directly, but a section in the Prashna Upanishad. It mentions that Prajapati, the Lord of all creatures, has two avenues or roads. They can be described as the sun and the moon. They can be described as that realm where people are destined because they have certain practices, namely tapasya. That is, a capacity to control the external aspects of the human persona, bodily things, what Sri Ramakrishna calls greed. And then to control the internal aspect with brahmacharya, controlling therefore lust. And then additionally having supreme faith in the divine. Faith in the divine means I like to go with the flow. I have such trust in nature, that is the unmanifest, from which all these other things come, whose only real essence is the Supreme, will supply all my needs, unasked, since I am her child. You can put it in this way. That's faith, what we call Shraddha. And then the final ingredient of this fourfold recipe for those who go along this line, poetically aimed at the line of Surya, the sun, will be a kind of a dedicated action beyond faith, a worshipful action, an action that has love in it. So all of this is described as a way, as an avenue, and this is the way that is pursued by some. Others will pursue a more materialist avenue. There will be good people. You often hear, I'm a good person, I don't need religion. And you'll often hear people say, I'm a good person because I have religion. But what they mean by religion is following all the ritualistic practices, which are essentially material in nature. And the other dimension will be a social dimension, doing some good in the world. And their duty with regard to virtue is done. These people will be dominated by what we symbolically might call the moon. Hatha Yoga takes the subject up when we train the Hatha Yoga teachers. We teach them about pranayama and so on. And part of the lesson from Saturday was to describe these various avenues, variously described in yogic language as idam pingala, representing sun and moon, a kind of polarity. But what does it represent? The moon has a connection with mind. And so those people who have not yet fully controlled the mind, the mind has a pulling power on them, will go, poetically speaking, to the world of the moon. And those others will go through a different avenue, poetically described as fire. Fire is a symbol of a symbol of work on the one side and sacrifice. Work and sacrifice. That's an avenue. And then they go to a realm of light and a realm of sun like that and so on. And these people will go to this Brahmaloka. So we have three avenues open to us described in the afterlife, assuming people are generally good people. The one avenue will be liberation in this life. That's the short circuit. That's the top prize, as it were, and not to come back again. Others will go to this Brahmaloka. Some will come back and teach others. But they would remain, largely speaking, in this eternal state of bliss until this whole life of Brahma ends, and then they come out again. Or, sorry, they don't come out again. Sorry, some other new thing comes out again. That's their eternity fixed. And others go to the position of what are called ancestors. So this is described now. After saying that multitude of beings coming forth and again merge, the next thing then is to say, beyond this unmanifest, where everything goes back into a state of pralaya, there is yet another unmanifested eternal, a supreme unmanifest existence which doesn't come or go, which doesn't perish. Everything else was perishing, even when all existences perish. The unmanifested is called the imperishable. It is said to be the ultimate goal. Those who attain to it return not. And that, he says, is my supreme abode, standing in the position of that supreme. So what is the way to attain it? Is put. Purushaha sa para partha bhaktya labascha ta anyaya yasya dha sthani bhutani yena sarvam idam tatam. That supreme Purusha, O Partha, is attainable by what? Unswerving devotion to him alone, within whom all beings dwell, by whom all this is pervaded. And then going on to yatra kale tanavritim avritim chaiva yoginaha prayata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bharata rishpa. Now I shall tell you, O best of the Bharatas, the time in which the yogis depart never to return, and also the time in which they depart to return. And then he describes this. How does he describe it? Describes it as Agnya Jyotir Aha Shuklaha Sanmasa Uttara Tatra Prayata Gachanti Brahma Brahmavido Janaha. Fire, light, daytime, bright half of the moon, and 6 months of the northern path of the sun. Then going forth the nose of Brahman, they go on to Brahman. This is described as a poetic way of describing an avenue full of light. Light indicating light of knowledge, light of truth, positivity. This avenue is open. The sun being something like a life giver is compared in this way. This is the avenue that is being indicated. And so we find, for example, in the Mahabharata, Bhishma biding his time until the right moment, the kind of northern passage, as it were, of the sun, where the Lord's timing is absolutely perfect. And so a literal presentation is there for him. But northern path, well, this world is orientated, this earth is orientated toward the pole star, which gives us a lesson in itself. Mythology tells us, or the story tells us about Dhruva, whose dedication and determination and non-deviance from truth aligns him there, and everything is orientated there as a pole star. And we know how the earth is tilted in such a way that the sun apparently moves between the various Capricorn, Cancer, a northern path, as it were, and a southern path, as it were, because of the Earth's axis tilt. And so the northern path is indicated in yogic language, that is something going upward. But the contrary to that would be the southern path. The southern path is described as Dhuma Ratris Tata Krishna Sanmasa Dakshinayanam. Smoke, night, the dark half of the moon, and the 6 months of the southern passage of the sun. Then going forth the yogi obtains the lunar light and then returns, having spent some time, returns to take the exam again. So it's told, the bright and dark, these paths deemed to be the world's eternal paths by the one a man goes not to return, by the other he returns again. 3 options are now there. Shuklasne gat hete jagata shashate mate ekaya yatyana avritim anyaya vartate punaha. And then, knowing these 2 paths, he says, Naite Shri Partha Janam Yogi Muyati Kashana Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Yoga Yukto Bhavarjana. Knowing these 2 paths, O Partha, no yogi is deluded. Therefore, O Arjuna, be steadfast in this yoga, this concentrated effort, this dedicated fixing the mind on the Supreme. And do it at all times, no holiday for it. Vedeshu yad yeshu tapasya chaiva dhaneshu yat punya paradishtam acheti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upachya chatam. The yogi who knows this transcends the fruits of the meritorious deeds attached to the study of the Vedas, sacrifices austerities and gifts, and attains to the supreme primeval abode. So this chapter, we understand, commenced with 7 questions raised by Arjuna. The Lord has answered all of them in order. He understands the explanation, understands what Akshara Brahman is, the regular chanting of the Vedas, the current performance of the ritualistic yajnas, the ardent doing of the austerities and the reverent payment of gifts are all meritorious acts conducive to the attainment of what we might call heaven, Swarga. But this high state also comes within the wheel of birth and death. On the other hand, an intellectual grasp of Akshara Brahman and attuning oneself to the attainment of him steadily lead one towards the supreme goal once the practice has caught up with it. Blessed is the yogi that wends his way towards this primeval abode. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvadi Akshara Brahma Yogo Nam Astamo Dhyaya. In the Upanishad of the Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of Brahman, Supreme, the science of yoga, dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjuna. This is the 8th discourse designated the yoga of the imperishable Brahman, Akshara Brahma Yoga. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Here are some questions.